We have a problem, one that beckons our attention. As AI companies race to pry open Pandora's box, what it means to be human is drawn into question. We find ourselves at the nexus between boundless opportunity and incalculable destruction. The age of AI has begun. We have at our fingertips a technology capable of doing our thinking for us, effortlessly providing the answers we seek. And herein lies the problem. Thinking is the foundation of humanity. It isn't a digital luxury, it's a human necessity. Yet most of us were never taught how to think. This isn't new. Your smartphone, social media algorithm, or AI assistant didn't create this. This is a truth as old as the human race. I believe the need to balance the use of omnipotent technologies with the need to think like a human is one of the greatest challenges that lies ahead of us. What does it mean to think like a human? We often compare ourselves to software. A glitch in our thinking is a defect in the code. But we aren't technology. We are complex organisms, and this is a meaningful distinction. Today's technology is governed by rules. It's binary. If not that, then this. Humans do not operate under such binary terms. Thinking is an embodied experience. We use our feelings, our senses, our beliefs, and our perceptions. It's messy, it's personal, and it's flawed. But the mechanics behind thinking are incredibly complex. So meet Bob. Bob is reasonably uncomplicated, so let's complicate Bob a bit more. There we go, that's better. Bob's in his late 30s. He has a job, a family. He likes to spend time in nature. By all accounts, Bob is your average guy. But let's delve a bit further into Bob's brain. What if I told you that Bob's life is a byproduct of reinforced patterns? That Bob is defined by a narrative, one that was established long ago. His upbringing, hobbies, academic experiences, social circles all inform Bob's unique narrative. This is called conditioning. This is where bias thrives and our self-identity resides. Bob lives most of his life on autopilot. Autopilot is inevitable. We all end up here. But lucky for Bob and for us, a counterweight exists. The counterbalance to autopilot is metacognition. This is defined as the ability to monitor and evaluate our own thinking. With little exception, we all have metacognitive ability. This puts Bob and us in the driver's seat. It takes us from passive participant to active creator through the interrogation of our own conditioning. This may not sound meaningful, but it can make a significant impact. Scientists assert that we make up to 35,000 decisions per day, 90 to 99% of which are assessed to be made in autopilot. Now, our brains are wired to do this. It conserves energy. But without active intervention, we run the risk of becoming victims of our own patterns. Metacognition opens the door to self-monitoring. This allows us to engage in skillful decision-making. This is called critical thinking. Now, ironically, critical thinking does not have a universal definition. We often use words like analytical, rational, reasoning, but I think we can do better. I define critical thinking as a self-reflective and self-corrective process, one that leads to greater self-empowerment. Technology does not think critically. Generative AI does not question its outputs. It simply synthesizes and provides. Thinking critically is a human capability, an important node in the thought process, in a human thought process, and one that I believe is our greatest asset in navigating the age of AI purposefully rather than recklessly. Devising a critical mind is something I've spent the last 25 years doing. The first decade of my career was spent in the United States intelligence community. I managed analytics cells tasked with analyzing geopolitical threats, anti-satellite capabilities, and supporting covert operations. Every day, I was asked to suspend bias and evaluate the world from multiple angles. My pathway to a critical mind was not through intellectual pursuit, but through consequence. I had to be accountable. My inferences required a defensible position. It'd be very easy to assume that a critical mind is reserved for covert operators, learned professionals, and academics. But this assumption is false. The skills that I acquired in the intelligence community are the same that I use to navigate my everyday life, from overcoming mental health conditions, choosing my social circles, my romantic partners, evaluating my professional opportunities, and ultimately making the decision on who I choose to be every day. A critical mind is about being accountable to yourself. It's the defensible position that makes up the blueprint of your life. Now, you don't have to go far to find tips on how to think critically. A simple Google search will provide countless articles, frameworks, YouTube clips, and generative AI explanations, many of which can be incredibly helpful, and I urge you all to seek them out. But my intention is to provide a more human perspective. I want to provide and focus 2 points that aren't as readily understood, but act as the building block to the process. Number 1, no two thinking processes are the same. And number 2, thinking is a graduated process. It's a skill that we learn over time. Often we rely on frameworks to shepherd us through the critical thinking process, but I assert the process has more in common with a fingerprint. Undeniably, universal properties exist, but really no two are the same. Some critical thinking fingerprints are strong in intellectual skills, like logic, reasoning, analytic. But these aren't the only ones, and they may not even be the most important ones. We don't often attribute critical thinking to emotional intelligence, yet these skills act as the bedrock. Things like some fingerprints are strong in things like self-reflection, social intelligence, motivation, and ultimately empathy. We often associate empathy with compassion, and it can be compassionate, but it also can be a very useful tool in Sun Tzu's Art of War. Empathy is tantamount in building a critical mind. Other fingertips or fingerprints are strong in learned skills like courage, the ability to communicate, your ability to understand consequence, and ultimately your life stage. There are as many critical thinking fingerprints as there are human beings on planet Earth, all espousing a mix of different skills and traits, all coming to slightly different or dramatically different conclusions. And that's okay. No one said life was ever meant to be cookie cutter. Which brings us to point number 2. Oftentimes when we think about critical thinking, it's black and white. I can do it or I cannot do it. In my experience, developing a critical mind is a lot like developing your physical fitness level. Your level sits on a continuum. You can progress your level over time through focused training. Academic psychologist Dr. Linda Elders and the late Dr. Richard Pohl were preeminent thinkers on the topic of critical thinking. They observed 6 distinct stages of thinking, starting with the unreflective thinker. This is the low level of fitness, to the master thinker. This is the high level of fitness. I've broken these 6 stages into 3 blocks: the unconscious block, the aware, and conscious. The unconscious block. This is a passive way of living. These are the couch potatoes, the actively less inclined. This block is defined as 2, the unreflective thinker and the challenging thinker. The unreflective thinker, life just happens to them. They don't assess their own thinking, and their decisions are driven by assumption and made through bias. The challenging thinker recognizes that there's something wrong with their thinking, that it may actually be causing problems in their life, but they don't have the skills required to change it. What's important about this block is we all spend time here. The point of the exercise is not to spend all of our time here. Which brings us to the middle of the continuum. This is more of the moderate fitness level, the aware. These are people that will systematically review their own conditioning. These are the gym goers and the weekend warriors. This block is defined as the beginning thinker and the practice thinker. The beginning thinker takes certain areas of their life, it might be work or social or family, and they begin to look at their own conditioning and bias to evolve it. The practice thinker devises strategies across all facets of their life to examine their conditioning and bias. Spending more time in the aware block can lessen the stronghold our conditioned patterns have over us. And finally, we get to conscious. These are the lifelong athletes. In this block, critical thinking is second nature. This is defined as the advanced thinker and the master thinker. Often when we think of these terms, we think in terms of the intellectual elite, Einstein. But actually, this group has more in common with Buddha. The advanced thinker systematically scrutinizes patterns in their life. They're typically humble and empathetic. And the master thinker, critical thinking is habitual. It's second nature. They tend to be community-focused and self-actualized. Scientists assert that on this side of the continuum, just 1% of the population resides there. This is a lifelong pursuit. Progressing across the continuum can take years. To go from unreflective to beginning or practice can be decades. It's not about making master thinker or achieving master thinker. It's about deciding where you want to be across the continuum. What works best for you? Not everyone going to the gym intends to be an Ironman athlete. Some want a baseline level of fitness, and some are less inclined. What matters is that you make that decision consciously. We live in increasingly uncertain times. Fact and truth are becoming harder to distinguish, and hyperbole is commonplace. AI, at least for now, is exacerbating this, not solving it. The critical mind gives us the ability to weather complexity more readily. It makes us less impressionable. We live life on our own terms, irrespective of what happens around us. It instills greater self-efficacy, so we are not bound by the patterns established in our past, giving us greater choice. A critical mind takes us from victim to victor. If this has piqued your interest, I have a few tips so you can get on the journey. The first is being aware that you are not your conditioning. You are not your bias, you are not your narrative, and you are not your conditioning. You have these things, and you can make the choice to change them. Understanding that critical thinking is a skill. It isn't something you just get up one day and begin doing. It's something that requires motivation and focused training over time. Through that training, you can develop that skill. Reflect before reacting. Just a simple 2 to 5 second pause can be enough to dilute your autopilot mode and put you in the driver's seat. Seeking out alternate information, whether this is seeking out different types of people, different news sources, different data, even when you don't agree with it, seeking out alternate information can dilute your own bias. And finally, less of a tip and more of an observation. If this feels like it's difficult, that's because it is. While we all have access to a critical mind, it is not our default setting. It's a little bit of a miracle that I'm leaning on this stage today. Just 11 weeks ago, I was hospitalized with septic arthritis in my right hip. By all accounts, that is a medical emergency. I'm not one to commemorate a hospital stay with photographs, but I did take one picture. And these are my admittance details that were displayed above my bed. They act as a powerful reminder of what I went through. Health and fitness have always been defining characteristics of who I am. You might say they're part of my own narrative. And during this time, both were stricken from me. Shortly after being admitted into hospital, I was rushed into emergency surgery to save my leg and ultimately my life. As I was being wheeled into the operating theater and through the hospital, I began to feel my body tense. Fear was taking over. It was at this time that I asked myself two questions. Question number one, did I have to do this? Was there any way that I could get out of this surgery? I so desperately wanted to do that. If I wanted to save my leg and have some semblance of a quality of life, while I wasn't where I wanted to be, I was exactly where I needed to be. Which brought me to question number two. Why was I so scared? This I had to dig a bit further for. The answer did not come as readily, but I finally got one. And the answer was, I did not want to wake up in the middle of surgery. I just could not take that. I had been through enough. And as I come to this conclusion, we arrive in the OR waiting area. And as luck would have it, my anesthesiologist was there to greet me. He looked down at me with a big smile and said, "Hi, I'm Greg." And I looked up at him and said, "Hi, I'm terrified." Greg, I've never had surgery before. I don't know what to expect. I'm scared, and I'm afraid I'm going to wake up in the middle of this procedure. He looked down at me, still with that same smile, and said, "Oh, it's possible to wake up, but it's highly improbable." Greg then began to walk me through all the medications that would be used, the process, and the extensive assessment that had already occurred on my behalf. With this information, I began to feel my body ease. And at this point, they roll me in to the operating room. Greg begins to administer the drugs into my system, and I look up at him and I say, "Now, Greg, if I wake up in the middle of this, I am not going to be happy with you." Greg looks down at me and says, "Relax. In all my time in doing this, no one has ever woken up." And that's when the OR nurse looked down at me and said, "Yeah, doll, but his first day was yesterday." I too have a dark sense of humor, so I let out a laugh. And the last thing I said before they put the oxygen mask over my face was, "Great comedic timing." And I'm happy to report Greg was right. I did not wake up in the middle of the procedure. My body was disempowered, but my mind did not have to be. That was a choice. By asking myself a series of questions and getting the answers I required, I was able to shift myself from a state of terror to one of ease in a matter of minutes. I believe to this day that going into that procedure laughing produced a better result, and at very minimum, it created a memory I value versus one that I avoid. And that's the thing about a critical mind. It creates empowerment when we feel disempowered. It creates choice when we didn't think we had any. So I ask you, where in your life do you feel disempowered? Where can a more critical mind give you greater choice?